Loading program, Trekommendations.
Hello and welcome to Trekommendations, the only Star Trek podcast designed to help you find hidden gems in the greater world of Star Trek-inspired content. To do this, I always bring on a guest to share their pick. Joining me today is a man who likes to share his thoughtful takes on Star Trek and sci-fi in general. It's Thomas W. Anderson, aka Trekker Tom. Hello.
Hi, Jason. It's great to be here.
I'm very happy to have you here. The episode that we'll release next week was recorded with someone from Australia. Having someone from the UK makes my life so much easier with navigating time zones, which people that listen to this show will know is a little bit of an obsession I'm having now. Having to navigate so many time zones, I keep just asking the question, why does this never come up in Star Trek?
Yeah, well, like, how are they doing? Like, is the whole of Earth in one time zone, like China is, like where the sunrise and sunset are at completely different times depending where you are?
Yeah, or whenever you rock up to a planet, like you've got to just hope that they're on the right part of the planet, that it's not the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious. That my final thought on this is, I just wonder if transporters make jet lag better or worse, because you're like instantly suddenly 7 hours behind. You don't even sit on a plane for 7 hours. You know, it's just out of nowhere. Suddenly it's nighttime. I don't know. I'm just curious. These are the thoughts I have. These are the things that that sit in my brain and stop me sleeping at night. But anyway, I digress. So, Tom, do you prefer Thomas or Tom? It's Trekker Tom, but your name is Thomas.
I'm completely ambivalent. I'm equally happy with either.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll interchange it throughout the show. So, Tom, remember I've said Tom this time. It's lovely to have you here, but first of all, we need to know what kind of a fan you are. We have to calibrate you, so we're going to go into some calibration questions.
Calibrating.
Let's start with what I'm going to say a nice, easy one. I think it's easy. Could you give us your top 3 Star Trek captains?
Oh, captains. I was thinking more shows, but captains is interesting. I'm probably going to go with Janeway for my top. Like,
really?
Yeah. Like, I just love her complete intransigence. She never backs down on a single thing. Like and her loyalty to her officers, and she's got this wonderful integration of authority with compassion. So I love that. I think she achieves the perfect captain balance of being a friend when it's appropriate, but also in control when it's appropriate. So I think if I were taking all of the captains from all the shows, I mean, at least the ones who are like the main characters of a show, then yeah, she would definitely be my top, I think. After that, I've never really given much thought to it, honestly. I think I will give classic Kirk a look in, because I like the fact that Kirk is a balance between Spock and Bones, essentially. The way I look at the original 3 characters in TOS is that Spock represents logic without emotion, and Bones is almost the opposite. He's highly emotional, and that often goes in front of his logic. And then Kirk takes both inputs and synthesizes them into a sensible course of action. And Kirk knows what his principles are. He's logical and rational about things, but he's also got passion behind it as well. And he gets angry when it's appropriate to, and sometimes, passionate when it's maybe not appropriate to. But generally, he's got his reason and emotion working together. So he kind of serves as the integration of the 2 characters beneath him. For a third, I don't know. That's a bit more challenging to come up with a third. I mean, as we'll probably get to talking about, I controversially think that Enterprise is one of, if not the best, of the shows. But I don't know if I'd call Archer one of the best captains. I do really like his commitment to his principles. His again, like Janeway, he's inviolate. He doesn't let people tell him. He doesn't take no for an answer, and he's got this enormous respect for his dad. But at the same time, I've got Picard hovering in the background, like classic, like show Picard. Red Letter Media make a distinction between show Picard and movie Picard, which I really appreciate. Of like the movie Picard is more of this like action hero, but show Picard is this archaeologist, deeply curious man. So he's probably my third. I'd probably go Janeway, Kirk, Picard, because mostly because of that intellectual side of Picard. I really appreciate his explorer mindset, and I think Star Trek, not just from an outside the show perspective, but even within the sort of context of the show, the Federation and Starfleet sometimes forget that exploration is the point of all of this. and Picard knows that through and through, and he's always returning to that theme.
Fantastic. I do like asking these top three questions because I think everyone's kind of got a number one, sometimes a number two. It's always trying to find that third pick is where people are like, oh, actually, I don't know. And I always find it the most interesting one to know how we arrive at number three. I do like your Kirk explainer. I think that's really good. I think personally I think a lot of people write off Kirk very quickly, particularly TOS Kirk, as like, as a product of the 60s, as a kind of, that sort of and it just, there's this idea of him just being this kind of macho, seducing every alien he comes across guy. But actually, when you go back and watch the show, he's, he is a really good commander. He's really got it together with, and some of the interactions he has with the different crew members, it's just, I was watching an episode just yesterday, and the way he's explaining, this guy who's so angry because of the Romulans, because of his, parents and being involved in the war, and he's like, "But that's not your war. Like that was their war." And I was just like, "Oh, he's yeah." I'm
There's also a bit of a show Kirk versus movie Kirk, isn't there? Because you've got movie Kirk
yes,
who's just almost like racially hates the Klingons in Undiscovered Country, which seems quite different from what you're describing there. And he's definitely a thoughtful
mm,
captain. He's not space James Bond. He's not just going around like making love and doing action stuff. Although he has that, he's probably the most physical captain that I think Star Trek's ever had
yes,
in the sort of fighting sense, which was a product of '60s TV. But at the same time, like other characters on the subsequent shows kind of filled that role. Like Riker was the Kirk of Next Generation, and
yeah,
that archetype's still there. It's just in the commander instead of in the captain.
yeah. Got to keep the captain safe. You got to keep the captain safe. Very good. Do you have a favorite episode of Star Trek?
I have several. It's really hard to pick one. Um, if I had to pick one, I think if I'm being objective about it, if I'm picking the one that I think is the strongest and most interesting, again, there's a few. I've highlighted before Iborg as one of my absolute
Mhm.
favorites. The season 5 TNG episode with Hugh being,
Yep.
because it's the first time we see a drone come out of the collective, basically,
Yep.
and it's all about individuality. It's all about the fact that life forms of all kinds are fundamentally individuals at the end of the day. Like we are one human. We're not humanity as a single organism, and the Borg is the opposite of that. They're this collective entity that suppresses the sort of natural individuality of life forms. And so to have one of them come out and rediscover what it means to be an individual is so awesome. And I think that was the sort of origin point of what made later Voyagers so interesting. Like season 4 onwards of Voyager is all doing that over and over again. You've got the Seven of Nine plotline
Yeah.
predominantly, which I find fascinating, but then also you get it with Icheb and all the other Borg characters on Voyager as well. And we're sort of, and Descent, the TNG two-parter as well, is dealing with that same idea. So that's one of my absolute favorites. If you want me to throw in a couple of others that I'd consider,
Oh, go on then.
in season 4 of Enterprise, there's a three-parter which deals with Vulcan society.
Mhm.
The Forge, Kiyoshara, and Awakening, I think, are the titles of the 3 episodes. I love season 4 of Enterprise. It's three-part structure generally, but that little serial is the point where the Vulcan plotline in Enterprise integrates and starts sort of, it sort of reaches its natural conclusion almost, because there's a lot of complaints in early Enterprise about the way the Vulcans were depicted, and that's because they're at the beginning of a journey of rediscovering how to use logic properly and
Mm.
how to not be sort of cloistered and locked in traditions, which is what they are at the start of Enterprise. So that three-parter that explores that and gets into all of the sort of teachings of Surak, and it really progresses Archer Trip to Paul, sort of three-part relationship as well in an interesting way. And then lastly, I'd just quickly say like two-parters from Voyager, Scorpion and Dark Frontier
Yep.
are both really interesting Borg stories to my mind, and dealing with both the morality of working with the Borg in certain contexts and against species 8472, and then also the Borg Queen's attempts to bring Seven of Nine back into the collective in Dark Frontier.
Nice. So I am trying to when I watch episodes of Star Trek now, I've made a spreadsheet and I'm trying to add them to this spreadsheet. of like ranking episodes,
Hmm.
and and kind of just by feel of like where I think it should sit, and not by series or by this. Just okay, yeah, this was better than that episode maybe, but not as good as this one, and just sort of seeing where things land. And I kind of want to not approach episodes in a particular order because I feel like that gives too much, um, you know, bias maybe because it was a great 5 episode run. So I'm quite interested to see. I'm going to go back and see some of these. Also, I'm trying to pick episodes. The other day, I showed my son Measure of a Man, which is one of my favorite episodes, uh, because he was like, I wanted him to watch Star Trek, and he was kind of, isn't it all just lasers and shooting and stuff? I don't care about that. And I was like, no, 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 no. This is why you've got to watch Measure of a Man, because it's all talking, and I think for me, what I really love about that is the fact that Riker has to be the prosecution. Like um, that's like kind of the cherry on top, just to really sell like duty and honor and doing everything by the book. Brilliant, excellent. These are good episodes, so I'll add them to my list of what to watch next, I guess.
Cool.
So, thank you. Final question for you. Looking at your Instagram, if people aren't following you, they should be, but you obviously talk about a lot of Star Trek, but you like to do some deep, thoughtful, kind of retrospective takes on other sci-fi franchises as well. What would be your dream Star Trek crossover?
Oh, you asked me this while I'm wearing an SG-1 shirt and I've got a Babylon 5 poster behind me. But that's interesting because, I mean, some of those universes just wouldn't make any sense,
Mhm.
like integrating with the Star Trek universe. Like, Stargate, for example, has just a completely different universe that it's existing in. Um, People talk about Star Trek and Doctor Who crossovers quite a lot, and there is a sort of natural way that can work quite easily because Doctor Who's just got such an open universe, and I think a lot of the same sort of metaphysical principles apply. Like time travel works in much a similar way and that kind of thing. So that's an easy one to do. I know it's been done in comic form, but I think any crossover like that would necessarily be kind of just a sort of non-canon joke
Mm.
episode, I guess. So I do quite like. I've seen a meme a few times which makes the point that in Star Trek, the Federation is always trying to avoid interfering with other cultures, and then in Stargate SG-1, we're just like gallivanting around, deliberately interfering in other cultures all the time. Like I find that clash really interesting. So I think of like a sort of debate on philosophy almost between Captain Picard and Daniel Jackson from Stargate SG-1 would be one of like my favorite things to watch. So I'll probably go with like just this completely outside the canon, just for the fun of it. Clash
Yeah.
between Next Generation and Stargate SG-1 would be really interesting to me.
I mean, there's absolutely a way it can happen, even if, as you said, it's a different universe. But we've slipped into mirror universes and other universes before. So all you need is a little technobabble at the beginning as to why there's this mix in this completely different universe where they've got these weird Stargate things, and there we go, and we're
Well,
on. Yeah, I
that's a whole bugbear of mine that I need to do a reel about at some point. Like, controversially, I guess I do not like alternate universe episodes or
yeah.
storylines, and both those franchises have them. Stargate and Star Trek both do it, but I find it devalues storylines, and it's when you've got the sense that if you just look at the Stargate example, like the Stargate is 10 seasons of Earth resisting invasion by various forces, mostly by the Goa'uld and then later by the Ori. And but then periodically we see these other universes. There's only like 6 episodes that do this, but we see these other universes where in almost all of them we failed to do that, and it makes all that heroism and all that effort that went into doing that seem kind of pointless because we just happened to be in the one universe where it went well.
Mhm.
Instead of, and I think one of the most important principles in fiction is that human action is what drives the story. Like it's people making choices, not it could be aliens, but a conscious mind making a choice to make a decision to do something is what causes the outcome. Is because
Yeah.
stories are all about choices at the end of the day, and if every choice you make somewhere else, another version of you's made the opposite choice, it completely takes away the meaning of the story for me.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Although I quite like the Zephyr and Cochrane just shooting the Vulcan when they arrive, and that sort of kicking off the
That's
but
kind I think the mirror universe is all right because like that's just like one universe that's
Yeah,
almost just deliberately the opposite of ours. But when you get into like parallels where there's like just 95 different universes, or like Yesterday's
yeah,
Enterprise is a good episode, but like that alternate timeline kind of thing, I generally prefer. This is one thing I like about Star Wars, as much as it's like less intellectual than Star Trek. I like the fact that the universe just stays straight,
yeah.
like all the way through. It's just you're in
For
one
now.
timeline, one universe. There's no time travel. There's no alternate dimensions or anything. It's just you know what you're dealing with.
Okay. That's a good point. It's a good point. I do feel like you maybe need to send a strongly worded letter to Marvel because they
Yeah,
cannot help themselves at the moment.
that's gone insane at this point. Like, yeah, from Multiverse of Madness onwards, it's just you can't even. It was hard enough to keep Marvel straight in your head before that.
Excellent. Well, I mean, that's been a fun discussion. I feel like we've learned a lot. We see where you sit now
Mhm.
in the fandom, which is excellent. Which means it's time to go into Red Alert. Hopefully, you can see I've added a clock to the screen.
Yep.
It's yeah, you definitely can see. People watching this later won't realize how big this clock is for you. I don't know what's happened. But
Yeah.
anyway, it is at this point, Thomas, that I will ask if you could, in 60 seconds or less, please tell us what is your recommendation and why you've brought it to the show.
Cool. So my recommendation is actually a fan film, and it's a film called Star Trek Horizon. And there's been a lot of Star Trek fan films, but to my mind, this is the best of them. And it's for a few reasons. Firstly, from a storytelling point of view, it actually concludes a lot of the unconcluded plot lines from Star Trek Enterprise. And like the future guy plot line that was just kind of dropped and never really picked up on. But more interestingly, it's one guy made this entire movie, and the production quality is phenomenal. It's his name's Tommy Kraft. He made all these uniforms, did all these digital set constructions, got a bunch of his mates in to do to play all the different roles, and created these really convincing, like recreated all the sets from Enterprise, all the costumes and everything, and made what is, I think, one of the most professional looking fan films that Star Trek's ever seen. So I regard Horizon as the concluding movie of the four seasons of Enterprise, and I think it's really worth checking out if you have the chance.
Excellent. I love it. And I mean, what timing? What phenomenal timing. Okay, I haven't watched this. This is great because we've had quite a few recommendations where recently I've known the thing, especially if it's podcasts or games. Quite often I'm across them. I'm going to be honest, I haven't really explored fan films at all, which is ironic because I have explored at great length fan audio dramas,
Oh, interesting.
and they are fantastic, and
Hmm.
some of them are so good. And I'm always saying like, these are people that love Star Trek. They love what maybe they love Voyager or they love DS9 or whatever, and they're like, and I'm gonna do like my take on this kind of thing. But what I like about them quite often is they're like new characters just on a ship or on a station or whatever. And I'm always kind of like, that's just what I want Star Trek to do. It's just not link everything or tie everything up to other things, but just new ship, new crew, new mission, bang, go. Which is why I think it's weird that I haven't looked at kind of any fan films.
Hmm.
I don't know
Yeah,
why.
I don't think I realized that fan audio dramas were a thing that existed. I've recently got into professional audio dramas, like especially in Doctor Who. I've been listening through the Big Finish Doctor Who dramas, and which you have actual actors from the classic show in it.
Mhm.
So yeah, those are brilliant, and I can't wait to just keep going through those. And I know Big Finish has done some stuff in Stargate and Blake Seven and other franchises as well. So I want to get into that. But yeah, I've never done the fan audio thing. In terms of fan films in Star Trek, like there's a few that are really well done, and then there's a lot that are heartwarming attempts by people who do not have talent and skill and resources to do something that's a tribute. And so it's kind of like it's cute, and I don't want to diss it, but the quality is not where it would need to be
Yeah.
kind of legitimately entertaining. And but there's some really standout ones. Of Gods and Men is probably the most famous and most popular one, where they got several actors from Star Trek Generations and from the original series. They've got Nichelle Nichols
Hmm.
and the guy who played the captain of the Enterprise B in Generations. I forget his name, and a couple other people to to actually like do this interesting story that's like revisiting some of the plot lines from the original series. And then they went on and did Renegades as well, which was quite good too. The same production crew who did Of Gods and
Right.
Men. Star Trek Continues is highly regarded as well. Sort of quality kind of varies in that show, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's really good. But
I
yeah,
think even my mum's told me about that one, and I haven't watched it. Like,
about
this is
Continue,
the level we're at now.
yeah.
I should. I will add this all to my list because I think that's what I need now. Yeah. So okay, but so there's a lot of good ones. You said that there's a lot of and I mean that was so eloquently put about the others that are passion projects that just for a number of reasons don't quite hit the mark, but we love the passion.
Yeah.
Uh, but you're really taken by this one. So what is it that puts it out there, kind of above all these others that you've mentioned are very good, but this is the one that you're like, this is my recommendation. What stands it apart?
It's two things. It's the story and the professionalism.
Yeah.
Like, it's well written, and it really satisfyingly, especially considering he didn't have access to any of like the cast from Enterprise. So
Yeah.
it's all new characters on one of the other NX ships, because they sort of established this thing of like the NX ships are named after the space shuttles. So it's Enterprise, Columbia, Challenger, Discovery, Atlantis, Endeavour. God, who knows if there's an NX-07 and what they called that, but that's the first six, we assume. And so this is on NX-04 Discovery. This is before Star Trek Discovery was a thing, but
Right.
but the ship's called Discovery, and so it's a different crew on a different ship, but they're basically trying to. I don't want to give like the plot away, but
No.
trying to solve a threat that ends up revealing the true nature of what Future Guy, the guy who's standing in the beam in Enterprise and Broken Bow, and so the first two seasons of Enterprise is this whole Temple Cold War
Yeah.
timeline, sorry, plot line, where there's this person from the future. And I think when we were starting Enterprise in 2001, and I watched it live when it started, we were all hoping that was going to be some integration with one of the shows like Next Gen, Voyager era, somebody from there. And there were various theories at the time, and that plotline just fizzled out and didn't go anywhere. Like, we sidetracked into the Zindi storyline because I think there were worries about ratings, and there was this sort of post 9/11 culture where everything was very much about terrorism and things like that, and so they were trying to get on that bandwagon. And then after that, season 4 was a new showrunner. I think Manny Koto did a really amazing job with season 4, and like, I think that's the strongest season of the show, but it kind of dropped that whole
Yeah.
Suliban Temple Cold War plotline. And Horizon picks that up and concludes it, and so it's between that and then just the professionalism that Tommy Craft had in making it, and the attention to detail he exhibits. And you can still tell it's an independently made low budget production in some, the occasional smudgy CGI, the odd questionably delivered line here and there, but like compared to most fan films, like the quality is markedly higher. And it's I've seen things that are professional productions that do not meet the level of quality that this movie has. So it really is an outstandingly well put together film, I think.
Okay. Well, I am going to search out also because you're talking about Future Man, and I literally, after showing my son Measure of a Man, um, I've put on Broken Bow to
Mm.
kind of say like, yeah, it's hard. I'm trying to find the right show for him to bring him in, which is do I say this now? Yeah, why not? This is one of my slight, my slight criticisms, dare I have them, about Academy
No.
is people saying, it's not for me. I get that, fine. And being like, it's the college experience and it's for those people. I feel like that's too small a demographic. And I just wish I realize like I'm not going to look up to these young cadets. I might relate more to the instructors. But I kind of think, well, surely for people like my son's 12, these are the people they look up to, right? Like the older kids. And I wish I could show him Academy, but from what I've seen so far, I'm like, it's a little bit too mature as a rating sort of
Yeah.
wise to show him. And I kind of wish they'd made it just a little, like if we're going this route, made it a little bit more accessible to a younger audience as well. Would have
Yeah.
been nice, but
In general, like, I've always kind of rejected the idea that to look up to, or sort of take treat as a life model a fictional
Mhm.
character. That character has to like demographically match you. Like, the age, race, gender of a character doesn't change whether or not that character's a potential role model to my mind. And when I was a child, all of my role model characters were adults. Like none of them were older kids or
Yeah.
other kids. Um, like I wasn't. I mean, when the Phantom Menace came out, like I wasn't like, oh great, a kid I can embody in the form of like Anakin. I mean, I found him kind of interesting, but like it's Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan that you're wanting to embody
Yeah.
in and likewise on a Star Trek level, like nobody at all ever in TNG was like Wesley Crusher's who I want to be. I think we're all looking at Picard and
Right.
Riker, and so I don't think that matters so much. But if you were looking for like new Trek to show a 12-year-old, I would definitely go to Prodigy. But
Yeah.
honestly, new Trek I'd show anyone out of all
This
of them.
this Wesley Crusher thing, because you've mentioned it, and your reaction to it is very much my reaction to it as well. And I saw a thing the other day, and somebody was like, there were like criticisms about these young cadets, and just being able to like solve these problems without any kind of training yet or any of this, and just a few of these things and similar things to kind of Burnham and different ones that could just. And somebody sort of saying, "Oh, none of you had a problem with Wesley Crusher being like this super genius and being able to do it." I thought everyone had a problem with Wesley Crusher. Nobody liked him
Yeah.
like back in the
Well,
day.
I mean, fairness to Will Wheaton, like I don't think it was his fault. I think it was a bit of a
Oh yeah,
it was kind of like Hayden Christensen in Star Wars, like where the bad writing undermined the actor,
yeah,
and obviously Next Generation season 1 is replete with bad writing at several points for various reasons, and I think Wesley Crusher's savant like genius is one of those, and that's a very annoying tendency in newer shows in a lot of franchises is to have what are known as Mary Sue characters,
mm,
which Crusher is a Mary Sue. People think that's like a gendered term, but it's not. It refers to men or women, like any character that's like unrealistically powerful for no obvious reason,
yeah,
and which is used a lot in reference to Rey in the new Star Wars movies. But I think Wesley Crusher is an excellent example of that, of where he's just like super genius for no obvious reason. It's not, you never saw him work to become that.
no,
And like that would be more interesting to me if a character like him is there, where it's like, okay, he's quite good, whatever, but he's studying and he's learning, and over the course of 4 or 7 seasons or whatever, we see him become this, ace Starfleet officer through hard work and struggle. That's much more interesting, and that's also what should have happened with Rey. She should have learned and grown to become this amazing character. And I think that would have been awesome if that had happened. But if somebody comes in at the beginning of a story and is already phenomenal, there's no journey to go on there, and
yeah.
like fiction is a journey, and it's like I said before, it's about choices, and you need to see the choices that made somebody successful, and you see that all the time with Captain Picard in TNG. Is you see him making the choices that make him the man he is.
Yeah. Well, my other feeling on that is, particularly like we were talking about TNG, so take the Enterprise as an example, is that that's the flagship of the Federation, and you are the best of the best, and you get called up to serve on this ship, right? But for me, what I want on that is like, if you are the best engineer, you're not a scientist. You're not a pilot. You are, you've clearly focused on, you might be able to do some of this other stuff, but like engineering is where you shine. And that, I want that, okay, we're in this problem and we need an engineer to solve it. Well, we're going to the engineer and he's going to know everything about it. And not every other character also knows so much
Yeah,
about this thing, because it doesn't make sense. Like, this is his speciality. And then we get a science problem and we've got our scientist who's going to be like, right, I'm going to analyze this and this because this is my skill set. So having, and then the captain's role is basically people management, right?
mm,
In this situation, are we going to take the engineering route? Are we going to take the science route? Are we going to take the, the war route and just blow it up? Like, how do I balance the people on my crew, listen to everybody's opinion, and then I make the decision, and then the commander follows through on my decision and
mm,
rallies the troops to do it. So when you've got one character who can fill all of those roles, it's
yeah,
sort of, it defies the purpose of having a crew of specialists, because we all know everything. That weakens sort of the concept of it, I think, in my opinion. It's similar with like, I've said this on, maybe not on here on another show, but like I have my uh my also thoughts about like when everything is tied to people's relationships and individual, and like, you rock up on a planet in the middle of nowhere and your cousin's there, and it's kind of like, this is pretty big. That feels weird to me that you have a direct connection there. And I liken it to kind of Columbo is a homicide detective who gets called out because there's a murder. That
Mm.
makes sense that he's there, versus your Jessica Fletchers who just happens to be everywhere she goes, people die. And it's like, I like the logic of, well, no, it's your job, you're there. So
Yeah.
the crew arriving at a planet and there being a problem, it's got nothing to do with them, but it's their job, is better than kind of a personal, oh, it's a and which is, anyway, that's not your fan film, so it doesn't matter. But I just thought, while we're talking about it, let's get it
Well,
out there.
the lazy writing is definitely a problem, like widespread problem in TV at the moment, not just in Star Trek, but like I mentioned before we started, like Stranger Things is like an exercise in lazy writing a lot of times, and it seems like a large chunk of audiences have sort of lost the ability to think critically about what they're watching, and to analyze. I mean, there's plenty of people who still are. I'm sure you can just go on Google and find like umpteen threads of people pointing out all the plot inconsistencies in Stranger Things or in Discovery or anything else. But and it's not a thing that never happened before. Like there was plenty of bad TV in the 80s and 90s, there's plenty of bad episodes from Next Generation and Voyager and all the shows that sort of classic Trekkers love as well. But it wasn't the norm, and it wasn't the standard. Like the norm and the standard sometimes in those shows became a bit cookie cutter and a bit sort of not well thought through sometimes. But it was generally intelligent television, and it was generally consistent. And like you say, if you run into a significant character, there's a reason behind it, and there's sometimes there's still lazy writing. I mean, like Star Trek Generations, the movie, is one of the laziest written things in Star Trek history. I think and I don't know if I actually got around to doing a reel on this. I want to, but I absolutely hate the line "We're the only ship in range." It's because it's one of the laziest things you can say in Star Trek, and this ties into the second episode of Starfleet Academy where the Beta Says ask for 5 ships to defend their planet, and it's like that doesn't seem like very much to me. Starfleet has like thousands of ships. There's that line in Generations where they're like right next to Earth, and they say we're the only ship in range. It's like, shouldn't there be like thousands of ships around Earth? Like this is the heart of the Federation, and that only makes sense if you're way out on the edge. And so much of Generations is like that. So lazy writing is not a new problem, but it is a more prominent problem now, and it seems like it's not. A lot of writers aren't taking the time and the care to think through the principles of storytelling, and at least try most of the time to coherently and intelligently, especially when you're only writing 10 episodes in a season. Like when you're writing 26, there's a bit more leeway for a few of them to suck. Whereas like when you're piling your resources into a smaller number, you'd expect the quality to sort of elevate correspondingly.
Yeah, we'd hope. But talking of good writing, let's go back to your fan film. What interested me is when you were saying like, oh, it's a conclusion to Enterprise.
Mhm.
I was thinking, oh, they're going to be playing characters we know, but then it's not that. It's new characters on another ship, which is great because it gives you more freedom,
Mhm.
because you're not having to try and emulate somebody else, which never feels quite right. So,
Yeah.
without spoiler, but like, who are some of these characters? Any that kind of particularly stood out? Yeah.
I probably won't go there so much just
Oh,
because I want to let you discover those
okay.
characters.
Okay.
One thing I will say is that I like that decision a lot.
Mm.
Firstly, I cringe when like random people try and play like next gen characters or something. One of the next gen era fan shows had a Captain Picard on for a while, and like he was doing a passable enough like acting job, but it's like it's so obviously not that character, and you really can't do that, especially not in the same time period without like finding somebody who's just got the acting chops of Patrick Stewart to pull off a part like that. And so I think Tommy Craft very deliberately made the decision not to go there and to just go something he can control completely. And the only one of my few slight criticisms of Horizon is there is a scene where Discovery meets the Enterprise, an excellent Enterprise, and like the captain of Discovery talks to Archer, but you never see or hear Archer. He's just there, and you see the Enterprise flying around, and they're on it, but you don't see them. And I'm always like, I kind of wish he hadn't included that. of
Yeah.
like, don't draw attention to the fact that we don't have any of the Enterprise characters around. Literally, just have your own ship, and maybe you can have like one of the other NX ships there too. We could see Atlantis or something, but
Yeah.
you,
We've just oh, this light's going off again. Ignore the light.
just
So
lean on what you're doing effectively, and I think
yeah,
apart from that one scene, I think he just very deliberately and consciously just did an original story that concludes those plot lines in terms of the higher level plot of the Temporal Cold War and Enterprise, like not the specific character stories. I think that's something we still need and should still get at some point, is a story that concludes the character arcs of. I did a reel about concluding Enterprise a couple of weeks ago, and I want to unkill Trip for one thing, because I think that hologram was wrong. I don't think he actually died, and then
yeah,
but then also like project more of Archer's timeline as president of the Federation, project a bit of Trip and T'Pol and where that went, and certain other things like that.
yeah. Are you a believer in the Section 31 theory that Trip faked his death and joined Section 31? Would that be an acceptable outcome for you, or you just think no, the hologram just got the name wrong and it was somebody else that died and Trip's fine? He's just
It could work if it's done in a way that preserves Trip's integrity. Like there's a very good plot line in season 4 of Enterprise with Malcolm and his connection to Section 31, and throughout it you see his wrestling, because again this comes back to what I was saying, like good storytelling is about people's choices, and season that plot line is about Malcolm trying to choose between loyalty and safety, and like all these things that are pulling him in different directions, and is a really powerful emotional scenes, a couple of really powerful emotional scenes between Malcolm and Archer, um, because of that, because Archer feels betrayed and Malcolm's feeling torn. He doesn't want to betray anyone, and like that's if we're gonna do a Trip show where we find out about that, like that could be a great series, because I love Connor Trinier and everything I've seen him in, and that could be really interesting, but it would have to be done in an intelligent way. It would have to be like I need like an Andor level of writing to
right.
to, to make that work, not a typical modern day sci-fi TV level of writing,
Yeah,
and so done well, that could be fascinating. Otherwise, yeah, I could just have it be that this historic hologram wasn't super accurate. Like that would be fine.
yeah. Moriarty had messed with the hologram program and the
This
holodeck
is
program somehow, and
stuff that
just
happened 200 years ago, and things are wrong sometimes. Like you read a book about
yeah,
1825, is going to have the odd error in it. It's just kind of just the way things are.
that is true. I was doing some research the other day for maybe a potential reel or something that I might do about 1026, just to kind of what jumping 1,000 years in the future looks like, and
Yeah.
like where were we, what was civilization like back then, and it's quite interesting to see, but you're absolutely right. Like we get, there's the classic, history is written by the victor type thing, but then there's also just history gets lost. People don't write things down accurately. You get conflicting stats from different,
Hmm.
historians, and so yeah, who knows what was compiled together. A lot had happened. A lot happened between then and TNG. Uh, what about this President Archer show that's being pitched that people are talking about a little bit? Would you be happy with that, or is that kind of too big a jump
Well,
to?
it's kind of the same answer to the Trip idea of like, yeah, if it's done well.
Yeah,
And it's the same thing with Starfleet Academy. Like you can do a Starfleet Academy show if you do it well, and I'm fine with pretty much any reasonable formulation that's like X or Y interesting show in space as a Star Trek pitch. Like so, people call it the West Wing in space. The idea of a Captain Archer show, and you can do that as long as you make it fit the sort of rules of the Star Trek universe. Like you can't do the thick of it in space. You can't do like this super adult like swearing ridden but you could do political intrigue in the context of the early Federation, because that would be fascinating. And I think one of the most interesting things about a Captain Archer as president of the Federation show would be the interrelations between the four big species that are forming the Federation: Tellarites, Andorians, Vulcans, and humans, which all have radically different cultural ideas and heritages. And one thing we never really explored in the Federation, sorry, in Star Trek about the Federation, is the Federation is very kind of human centric in the way it's presented in the classic shows, and it's a lot of basically human philosophy that's guiding how it's being formed, and we never see what's the Vulcan side of Federation life like. What's the
Yeah.
Andorian, Tellarite, whatever Bolian side of Federation life like where those cultures' histories, as opposed to our particular history about how we look at certain things about our culture and morality, like how are these other races, and to what extent does the Federation like harmonize? Is it
Mm.
like the EU where it's like you're sort of regulatorily aligning all these different states, or is it much more of a loose federation where if you go to Boli or you go to Vulcan or whatever, you live under a essentially different legal system with just a few overarching common principles, but like maybe some of these races of what do you like states, nations, maybe some of them still have market economies, maybe some of them don't. Like, how is that being interworked? Is the whole federation just running on this unified system? What about people in Vulcan who don't want to live under that system? Like, how do you deal with
Yeah.
that sort of stuff? And that could be fascinating. Like, there's a breakaway group of Tellarites who want to keep the old Tellarite culture alive. Do they? How do we handle that? Are we just gonna go in militarily and like enforce compliance? And it's kind of like, what if states try to secede from the US? Like, how do you handle that constitutionally? And you can do that. That would be a great like thread in that show. Would be, okay, we're 5 years down or 10, 15 years down into the Federation, suddenly this nation wants to secede.
Yeah.
Is it legitimate? Is it not? Why not? And that requires such intelligent writing of like getting into, why is the Federation a good thing? Why do we care if somebody's a member or not? Is this just, are we empire building here? Do we just want to get as much territory as we can? Or is it because we're worried that if this nation secedes, it's going to be a threat? Or if it secedes, it's going to violate somebody's rights in that culture? Are we looking after the people there, or are we holding them against their will? And like all those arguments can be played out in an intelligently written series like that. And
Yeah.
I think Discovery, like season 4 and 5, tried to do some of this stuff with like the rebuilding of the Federation after the burn, but it was kind of very surface level, very superficial when it was doing it. And you could do a really interesting, deep, intellectual, like kind of Babylon 5 did in season 5 of Babylon 5, if you've seen that, where Sheridan becomes president of the Interstellar Alliance, and they're dealing a lot with who's the member, who's not, and why not. And
Mm.
I think you could still go a lot richer and deeper than B5 did with that concept. But
Yeah.
and that's why I say, like, what I want to see is like an Andor of Star Trek, like a
Mhm.
show in the Star Trek universe that's got the level of political and philosophical sophistication that Andor has, which is just a standout. Like, I've not seen anything that good since Firefly in terms of quality
Yeah.
of writing in sci-fi.
And I mean, we had sort of a bit of it with like the Bajorans in Deep Space Nine, and kind of this provisional government, and then people are being like, well, what, why are they making decisions about what happens to us now? Like, what gives
Yeah,
them the right? And you do like the idea of a Tellarite farmer just being like, hold on a second, you're telling me now the crops I grow and have sold for all these years, what we've got no like money doesn't exist anymore. So why am I growing these crops to
yeah,
sell if no one's buying them, because I've got to just give them away? Like, what's happening here? Just, yeah, it would be interesting to see, not always like the spacefaring and the people that have decided to make their home on their home world have lived that way for generations. Also, I think it's funny because you're right. Like, the Federation's very human centric and very human focused, and it's like we were the last to get out, and we're like, it took us longer to develop these tools than you guys, but we think we know what's best. You're like, hold on,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It's a bit like it's like the whole of humanity in Star Trek is like Kirk in the Kelvin timeline movies, where he just like rushes to the captain's chair in like 10 minutes. It feels like we've done that on like a sort of galactic level. But
yeah,
that's one thing I like about Babylon 5 as well, is that the races are all at wildly different levels of technological advancement. And in Star Trek, it kind of feels like everyone's at roughly parity with like
mm,
in however many billions of years the universe has actually been around. It might be more than we think at the moment, but like, in at least 13 billion years, that all these races came to fruition within like 100 years of each other. Whereas in B5, there's races that are like millions of years more advanced, and there's some that are less advanced than us, who or have like stolen or traded their way to technological sophistication
yeah.
rather than to sort of developing. But no,
Well,
in terms of, sorry, just in terms of that political thing, you mentioned DS9, and like one of the most interesting things in DS9 is the Marquis storyline, and that really is one of the most morally questionable things I think the Federation's ever done. Is that trade deal with, well, it starts in TNG and then it goes into Voyager as well, but like that trade deal with the Cardassians, and they basically dispossessed a bunch of their own citizens and then treated them like enemy faction, and like
Yeah.
that was a really interesting plot line, and it affects all three shows, and that's the kind of sophistication and exploration I want. But I'd also really like to see the whole, like you say, the consequences of a moneyless society. Like the author went into this a bit, but like Next Generation never, Star Trek generally never really got into like, okay, I own my house, hopefully. Like, you know, I have some, there is some concept, you've got to have some concept of property. Otherwise, you can't ever like make changes to your building if it's just owned by the state. Like, so how does ownership work? Like Cisco's dad has a restaurant in DS9. Like, okay, it's, how's the trading working? Like, if somebody comes in to eat his food, like, what's he getting? Like, how's he sustaining this as a sort of business? Like, it would be interesting to explore that, and especially if you've got Lower Decks did this, but like did it really badly. Whereas you've got people like trying to hold on to capitalism on a planet that's joined the Federation. It's like, okay, that's an understandable situation to be in. You don't want to have your stuff stolen from you that you've worked hard to build over. Like, how are we respecting people's right to like live their lives and do what they want to do? If I want to start a business in the Federation, like surely
Yeah.
if I want to make some stuff and offer it to people in trade, like why should I not be allowed to do that? That seems unfair.
Well, it's like there's, you know, I was saying I watched Measure of the Man the other day, and it's just funny when there's like the interaction between Picard and the other captain that's the judge, but the JAG officer, but I can't remember her name right now.
Yeah.
But she's like, you know, they multiple times they mention this like dinner, and he's like, dinner? It's like, you buying? Yeah, okay. And it's like, what do you mean you're buying? What, as in you're going to go and ask them to give you the food, but you're not paying for it. So who cares who's buying? Like at this point, it's
People forget in TOS there was money. Like
yeah,
in the original series, there's like a credit system. It was only Voyage Home that introduced the idea that there's no money in the future, and which wasn't even like a Roddenberry thing. That was in the movie timeline that he had nothing to do with. And then, but then he got big on the idea because by the 80s, I think he was much more disenfranchised with Americanism and capitalism than he had been in the 60s because of all the rejections he'd gone through with and the studio system problems. And so he hits on this idea of like a moneyless future, and it comes up like twice ever in Star Trek, or like three times I can remember it. It's mentioned in the Neutral Zone, which is like the famous one everyone goes to, and then it's mentioned once in Voyager in passing in Dark Frontier, and it's mentioned in First Contact. And then like the rest of the time, we kind of forget it's a thing, and we talk. And the Federation like keeps money around anyway because they have to deal with other species like the Ferengi and stuff, so they still have banks for buying stuff from other races. And then especially it's happened quite a bit in old Trek, like you mentioned as well, like in 90s Trek, but it also happens a lot in new Trek where they just forget that money's not a thing, and they forget that they use metric in the future and things like that as well. And so like Imperial units slip out, references to money slip out, all these things. And that's one of my bigger issues with new Trek is it feels like it's forgotten what universe it's in sometimes. Like it forgets there's no TV in the future, and some of these ideas are kind of dumb. Like I always thought that there being no TV in the future was a bit dumb. Like it feels like there should be something else. We have holo novels a bit, but we're not just going to forget like a major art form. Like this is a TV show. So Star Trek writers should appreciate the fact that TV is a valuable art form because they're making it. But then you're like within that TV show, we're saying, "Oh, TV dies because we all have like better things to do with our time." It's like, no, watching Star Trek's a good thing to do with your time. I feel
yeah,
like the Star Trek crew should totally do movie night like they do in Enterprise, where they get
yeah,
together and like watch great episodes of TV or movies from the past. Like that's an art form that I'm pretty sure if we have a sensible direction of cultural growth in the next few hundred years, in the 24th century, we will look back on great TV and celebrate it like we do right now on these sorts of shows, alongside literature and plays and video games and everything else that's valuable. So, but that is the universe we're in. So deal with that. Don't like just ignore it and sort of move on like nothing's changed.
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. You watch the way like television is going now and movies and stuff, and you're thinking, well, surely there'd be like a Kirk biopic that's played by some actor, like trying to tell Kirk's story, and then you get like a Spock biopic where Kirk is very different than the Kirk we saw in the Kirk one, and it's just of
It'd be like that
yeah,
X-Files episode where like the same events are retold by like six different people, and everyone's behavior is different depending on who's retelling the story. So you get like Scully's version of Mulder is like ridiculously conspiracy orientated, and then Mulder's version of Scully is like just constantly critical. Like you
yeah.
can get the same basic effect.
And then McCoy does one where he's played by a monkey because he saw the Robbie Williams one and he was like, oh, I'll do something different and do that.
One
So
of the most baffling decisions in history.
yeah, no, I like it. I've interesting, but I am now going to have to go on a deep Star Trek fan film dive because, and I think that like as much as our conversation has deviated off into many different directions, I think that's the beauty of then the fan films, is like we speculate on some of these things of like, oh, but what would it be if this happened, or how would this person react in, if I'm building my business. And then fan films are where people have been like, oh, I've got an idea, or I've got a thought, or there's something I'm interested in, but interested enough that I'm going to write a script and go to the time to make props and get my friends involved and film it and edit it and you know add sound design and all the other elements that will make this a good one versus a a less good one. And I love that, and I think as technology moves and it's actually so much easier to do these things now, um, you'd hope we'd get more better ones. Would be the hope.
I think the whole thing got kind of derailed by the Axanar controversy that happened. I don't know if you know about that, but there was the whole thing where the Paramount and CBS sued the producers of Axanar, which was
Right.
the Star Trek fan film, and so that resulted in all these restrictions being put on, and there was a whole thing about like how whether or not the Axanar production was legitimate and fair anyway, which I don't really know enough to get into, but it was looking like it was going to be a really good production technically, and then I think Discovery was about to start and they got cold feet, and so they basically sued and tried to stop fan films from being made, and then there was a pushback against that, so then they ended up producing these guidelines. So now, ever since like 2016, Star Trek fan films are restricted to like 2 30-minute episodes or 2 15-minute episodes or something like that. So they can still make them, but they're under strict restrictions on what form they can take, and they can only include certain things. So that kind of because I think Tommy Kraft was going to do another like Horizon movie, but didn't because of that. And I think he actually got a letter from Paramount CBS saying at the time.
Don't
I
do
imagine if
another.
he started a year or two later after that whole thing boiled down, he probably would have been able to do it. But I don't know. I keep meaning to look in and see like what he's done since, because this was like 2015 or something that he did this.
Yeah.
I actually haven't checked if he's made anything else since. I probably should do.
But sometimes these like very creative people, when you put limitations on them, it just they become even more creative. Sometimes that like some real genius is born from restrictions, and like, well, we had these restrictions, so we did this instead, and we did that, and you're like, oh, that's actually amazing, like how you've done that. So never say never. So maybe we can find a silver lining in all of this.
Really, it's like so many great episodes of shows have come about because like they wanted to shoot something on standing sets without bringing in any like outside locations or new sets or things like that, and you're like, okay, we've got a bottle show. What do we do? And then you get like Stargate SG-1 is my favorite sci-fi of all time, and like you get episodes like the name of it's going to Window of Opportunity, which is a like SG-1 time loop episode, and it's one of the funniest and best written episodes of all time. And it's literally just using the existing characters on their standing sets and saving money. But somebody sat down and thought, okay, what can we do creatively with that restriction?
Yeah, we've run out of money. We've used all our money. We've got to film something, and it's I think did they say have they just put SG-1 back on Netflix? I think so.
Yeah, because Amazon I think it's Amazon has bought the MGM entire back catalogue, and so they're producing a new Stargate series now, which is extremely exciting.
I've heard. I mean,
people involved, because I was so worried for so long that we are going to get a Stargate reboot or like a Roland Emmerich situation or something. And this has Brad Wright and Jonathan Glasser and all this, not Jonathan Glasser, Brad Wright and Joseph Malazzi and people like that who we can trust with this franchise. So I'm quite excited for that.
Yeah, I don't think I've revisited it since like it originally aired. I think it's going to be, when was that?
SG-1 was 97 to 2007, and Atlantis was 2004 to 9.
Yeah.
Universe was 9 to 11.
Wow. Yeah. Have you got this all written down somewhere, or is this just in your brain? You're just pulling these numbers out of your head.
I could do it with Star Trek as well, but it would take too long, so I probably won't.
Yeah, too many shows. Very impressive. I can't do that. Okay. Well, this has been a fun chat. We now need to move into the final part of the show, that is incoming transmissions.
Incoming transmission.
So if you want to reach the show, you can do so through email, trekommendations@gmail.com, or if you respond on any of the videos on YouTube or Spotify, if you leave a review, or also comments and discussions that I'm having on TikTok, Instagram, things like that. So that's what we're going to pull from today. These have been recorded in advance, so this will be old news by the time people hear this episode. But as of this coming out, that we'd only had up to episode 3. As to this recording, we'd only had up to episode 3 of Starfleet Academy, and I just had I had 2 questions about the Calica game and how Starfleet won one of the rounds, and I have issue with how they won it, and I've put it out there as a reel, and I also responded on Star Trek's Instagram account because they put up a clip, and in the clip they show the phaser rifle, the phasers that only have one setting, transport. That's what we're told, and I just said I just want to know how Genesis was able to blow up a replicator with it if it only has one setting. And some people have replied to that, and they said they weren't playing in any way an official game at that point in the story. So that was the Dragon's Domain 13. To which I said, but if it only had one setting, how did it do damage? And if you can do that on the transport setting, then why didn't it damage the rest of the atrium? That's got nothing to do with whether the game is official or not, just wondering how the tech works in the universe. And someone said, well, it beamed out vital components to short out the device. Somebody else said it selected components that caused the replicator to explode. So, well, a few are saying this. This is my reply to that. A few are saying this, and it's the only thing that could make sense, although it does mean this part must have been on the external casing of the replicator. Also, what happened to all the missed shots throughout the game? Were they transporting over components of other components of the atrium all over the place? And should we not also have seen those components land in the penalty box? Every solution just raises more questions. So these are my questions. The other issue I had, which people addressed in comments, was Sam, the hologram, being able to go permeable and let the shots go past her. And when they said that was cheating, they were like, oh, there's nothing in the rules, which I absolutely think there should be something in the rules, because the only way you're allowed to do it. And a few responded to that saying that this is actually training for combat, and in combat you can't say, you're cheating if you meet someone that can do this. My problem with that argument is that whenever we saw them do anything other than shoot them with the transport phaser, so when they punched somebody, when they grabbed something, they were penalized for that, because you're not allowed to do that. So you can't not let them find a way around and then have a player that just can't be shot. That just makes no sense to me. So there we go. That's the incoming translation, the conversation I had with people on Instagram. So if you want to be involved in these fun conversations, jump on, find it. But yeah, some little plot holes there. I just can't. I just want to know how the tech works. That's all I'm interested in. Okay, so thank you for that, for everyone listening to me rant on that little bit there. I'm trying to think where I've landed on my going around. I think I'm going back to Thomas now, but I'm not sure. Okay. Thomas or Tom? Let's see. I can't remember. I can't remember where I am. I said I would go between them, and I've lost count of how many Toms versus how many Thomas.
Each. That's fine. Like that. I can't stand. Yeah. I can't stand Tom, but otherwise I'm good.
Okay. Tom, if people want to find you and hear some more of your insightful thoughts on Star Trek and other franchises, where is the best place for them to locate you?
So I'm just doing that all on Instagram at the moment. So that's Instagram at trekker.tom. And I also have a book out, which is behind me, called Sci-Fi to Live By, which is a collection of essays I've written about various sci-fi shows and the values we get from them and how we can apply those in our lives. So I've tried to pick out what I think are some of the best values from Star Trek, Stargate, various other franchises as well, and bring them into one collection of useful life advice from science fiction.
Where can people get that book if they're interested?
That's on Amazon. So it's a print-on-demand thing. So if you just order one, they'll print one and ship it to you in any country that has Amazon service.
Look at that. There you go. No excuses, everybody. I don't want to hear complaints about shipping. That's always the problem. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for making yourself available to share some of your thoughts with us today. Thank you, everybody that watched and listened. Please leave your thoughts and things in the comments, or you can comment on Spotify as well. So do that if you want. So that would be nice. And I will be back next week with another guest and another Trekommendation.
Ending program.